The following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah! Go Cowboys! This is Girls Talk, Boys Talk, presented by Jigsaw Dating, preferred dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and broadcasting live from Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters at the Star.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by the preferred dating app of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm your host, Kelsey Charles, joined by an incredible crew. We have Jess Tavares, Aisha Morrison, and Haley Sutton in the house. Guys, I know there's a lot of talking points going on. It's a big rivalry week for these two teams. I do want to start with the injury report, but then I also want to break down the X's and O's of the matchup because, y'all, this one is meaty. It is meaty, for lack of a way of saying it. We're just going to say it that anyways. Okay, so diving in from the get-go, I mean, we've talked about Dak Prescott enough this week, but we're going to talk about him one more time because we'd be remiss not to. He has been officially upgraded from DNP to limited. I know you guys spent some time out at practice today. Yesterday, he was throwing around with his left hand yesterday. I kind of feel like that was like a flex, if you will.
Oh, it was, 100%. We talked about it yesterday.
Yeah.
It was purposeful.
Okay, I'm glad we're aligned on that. But listen, like, the man is on the way up. It seems, for all intents and purposes, like he's feeling pretty good about his health. Are you guys, just seeing that? Do you feel like the injury report reflects that? Do you feel like technically he could play this weekend, but like because of Cooper Rush, they have another minute to leave him out?
Yeah, definitely. I think that second or the last point that you made, obviously, when you've got Cooper Rush coming in and playing the way he's been playing, you have to give him that respect at the very least. Give him an opportunity to have a competitive game against the Eagles, especially with Mike McCarthy saying earlier in the week that Cooper Rush is the guy who they're preparing at starter. I think, obviously, it's a bonus to have Dak Prescott limited, but I don't think that he could necessarily be ready to play. I think worst case scenario, something happens, it's good to have him, out and throwing and getting those reps. But I think this is Cooper week again.
And that's also promising, just hearing, CeeDee Lamb and some of the other players talk about just the way that the ball feels, the delivery, things like that, things feeling normal. I think that's good for us to be hearing in regard to, how he's passing the ball, if he is passing the ball, whatever the case may be. So definitely promising stuff. I like we talked about, we want him healthy.
Yeah.
Regardless, you want the guy healthy. And honestly, something that I was concerned about, like when you start talking about playing a Philly defense that is kind of nasty up front, man, you start thinking about the subsequential injuries and how they happen sometimes, and I'm just like, I don't even want to risk, somebody just accidentally banging it. Like, 'cause it was very accidental the way that it happened. So,
right.
I'm just waiting. I'm all right.
Well,
I think we all right.
And I'm cool with waiting because, again, I think everybody forgets how early on we are in the season, and you want to think of the long term of this team and what I think we all know they're capable of doing this season.
Sure.
If they continue to build up like they have. So looking at the long term of it, I don't want Dak to be put in a position or anything to
don't rush, baby.
And you ride off of what Cooper Rush has done the last few weeks. You ride off of it, you build on that success, and you keep going with it as long as you need to.
Okay, I know we talked about it a lot, but I want to just throw this one more thing in here before we move on to the other injury report items. Again, there's been two camps of the conversation about if Cooper Rush keeps playing well, if he wins this divisional rivalry, which would be massive for him, do you keep him in, right? It's a pretty controversial take, but then there's the other side that's like, absolutely not. Dak is a starter, franchise quarterback. You paid him for a reason. Well, I thought this was an interesting perspective. Someone who's actually been there before, Troy Aikman. You might have heard of him. He was on DFW's The Ticket, and he said, listen, do you put Dak in? Like, it's a conversation that's happening right now. He actually had this happen to him in 1991 where he got injured, and Steve Berline came in and won the last 5 games of the regular season, and Troy was like, listen, I'm healthy now. I'm ready to play. But Jimmy actually stayed with Steve in the postseason, and Troy was upset about it. But I feel like I personally have been of the camp of, no, absolutely not. That's your starter. That's my franchise quarterback. Like, I appreciate you, Coop, but I'm going with my main guy. But I do have to say, I felt like it was pretty interesting to hear that perspective come from Troy Aikman, not only a guy that's been there himself, but a legend in these halls, if you will.
I along that same line, I think that that's the obvious thinking, right? Like, thank you so much, Cooper. Dak's our guy. And it was interesting today listening to Cooper talk because he kind of actually alluded to that himself. You know, someone asked him just about that and, you know, what it would be like when Dak's coming back or whatever, what he's learned. And Cooper said, you know, like, yeah, like Dak's our quarterback, Dak's our guy. And basically he said, I'm going to hold down the fort until Dak is ready to come back. And so to me, that's the most impressive thing about Cooper Rush is that from the very beginning, he's known his role. He knows that he's just, I don't want to say this disrespectfully, but right now he's kind of a placeholder, right? Mm-hmm. He's come in, he's done his job, and he's been incredible at what he's done.
Sure.
But just the recognition to, you know, we talked a lot about self-scouting today. So just having that inside of him being like, look, I'm going to come in and do what I need to do as long as I need to do. And then when Dak comes back, you know, c'est la vie.
And you know what? Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, actually talked about this in a press conference this week, saying, hey, we have more tape on Cooper Rush than any of the other teams that played him this season, which, yeah, obviously. But I think something that we've talked about many, many times is Cooper Rush has been set up for success by the coaching, by the team around him, by the culture that's really cultivated within the Cowboys locker room. So I think, yeah, at this point, we know what's happening. We know Cooper Rush is the backup. Dak is QB1. And, you know, as long as Cooper Rush needs to be in, that's fine, as long as Dak is healing to the full extent.
I loved what he said, too, just real quick, while we're talking about Cooper. Whenever I asked him, you know, like, what have you learned in these last couple of weeks? Just about, like, not just about yourself as a quarterback, but as a person. And I love what he said. I can't wait. I'm going to put it on Twitter later. But he just said, you know, it's okay to be yourself. Like, it's okay to embrace it. You don't have to make it into this big spectacle. You can be who you are and be successful. And, like, what a message just for life in general, right? Like, here's
beautiful.
This guy you've seen him come out of his shell over the last couple of weeks, but just as a quarterback really stepping up and to have that, again, just that self-awareness of being like, yeah, you can be the quiet, kind of quirky guy to come in for the big-time quarterback, and you can still be just as successful in your own way. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I love that.
Now, when we were talking about injury reports, I wanted to definitely add that Jordan Mailata, can we talk about the Eagles injury report? So Jordan Mailata, their left tackle, he's important to what they do offensively. He's dealing with a shoulder injury. It looked like he was limited in practice today, so we'll keep an eye out on that. And then also, too, Jason Kelsey, he's dealing with the center, fantastic center. He is dealing with a high ankle sprain. So
Landon
that is something.
Dickerson, too.
Yes, absolutely. Also, too, their kicker, Jake Elliott, he didn't kick last week. They brought in
the kicker, baby.
So, you know, when you start looking at some of their injuries and maybe, I mean, those guys are hampered up there. A few of those guys are dealing with some injuries that may, you know, bode well for the Cowboys defensive line. But for special teams, I mean, the Eagles have only kicked 6 field goals. They're the bottom of the league special teams wise. So I think that's a matchup. We'll get more into it later. But some of their injuries are key when you start talking about special teams.
It's definitely going to be important in my opinion. I think that's one of the actually underdog storylines of this entire game because rivalry games, you can always throw everything out the window, right? Especially with the Cowboys and Eagles. It's probably like the most heated it has been in years for obvious reasons. But yeah, I think it's going to be a massively key component for this game. A couple other injuries I want to make sure we just touch on before we move on to actually just entire rivalry in general, because I love this week. Micah Parsons upgraded to limited, which I think is important. He is going to play this weekend, or at least he has been vehement that he will. And so, yeah, I believe him on that. Jason Peters, he's going to be a go, it seems like. And I think the rest are kind of par for the course. We know DeMarcus Lawrence, he's obviously dealing with an injury, but, you know, it seems like this team is fueled by this chip on their shoulder where they came into this season and not a lot of people believed in them. And honestly, I'll be frank, on paper, rightfully so, because a lot of the things that they should have been upgrading, they didn't technically per se upgrade. They lost a lot of guys in free agency. You know, it just didn't seem like they went out and solved the problems that needed solving. And then on top of that, you lose your quarterback and everyone's like, well, they're done. And, you know, they've turned around and said, well, look at us now.
Just kidding.
Yeah, literally. And I respect the hell out of it. I really do. Like, I will eat crow all day if this is what it looks like.
And CeeDee Lamb talked about that in his interview, talking about, you know, playing, they are playing with a chip on their shoulder. And even listening to Tank's interview today,
I'm so glad you brought it up.
That chip got some dip on it.
I was just ready to say that because it's so interesting when you talk about, you know, like the quote-unquote disrespect that this team feels being called underdogs. It wasn't until today that it really resonated with me how annoyed they're are really at that narrative. Like when Tank the first 3 questions that Tank was asked today, or roughly the first 3, were all about Jalen Hurts. Well, what does Jalen Hurts offer? Like, how do you stop Jalen Hurts? And finally, Tank said, y'all, like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, we are also playing in the game. Like, if y'all either going to ask me about what we're doing or I'm not talking to you. And I love that energy because, like, sometimes you do get caught up in, like, what the Eagles are offering. And sure, it's like the easy way out, or it's what's in front of you to say, like, here's the matchup, here's what you're looking at. But, like, he put us in a place.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? He put us in check.
And that's very common, like, and we've talked about it plenty of times. It's one thing about Cowboys Nation that I think, like, we forget. We got guys, too.
Yeah,
we got guys
a lot
too.
of guys,
and when you're talking about this defense is looking like, yeah, the Eagles do have some changes, but they're thinking we played the same off. No, they're thinking we played the same offensive line last year. Absolutely, and then they essentially when you look at the point totals of last year, I mean, they're like, we beat this team by almost 40 points in both games last year. Is there no relevancy to what happened? And granted, it is a new season and stuff, but this defense is like they feel better than what they did last year. And so I do understand some of like, hey, can y'all mention us? Can y'all talk about us, please? Because
like I said, it wasn't until Tank spoke today that I was like, oh, like,
no, they're over it. They're over it.
You look at, not only does this defense have the stats to back up what they have created this season, but then it goes with what we were talking about earlier this week, that they also do things that do not show up on the stats. They create those key plays for players to step up. You have, even the silent killers of the defense who, you see in a game every now and then. Anthony Barr, perfect example. Anthony Barr on Sunday, everyone's like, oh, where has Anthony Barr been?
He's been there.
You haven't been watching enough if you haven't seen him making plays or making things happen for other guys to make plays. And it's just so complimentary within that defense. This entire team really, the culture is just so special. And I will speak on that soapbox every single day about that.
I actually do want to talk about the culture more, but not just with this team, but with this rivalry, because I think that in recent years, the NFC East has just been such a roller coaster, right? Like I pride myself on being like a little bit of a meme lord on Twitter. And when I say meme lord, I mean just like taking people that make amazing memes and retweeting them. And I have one saved on my phone that is like 4 trash cans lined up, and it's like all of the NFC East logos on them, right? That wasn't that long ago, folks, okay? And now you've got Eagles sitting atop the division at 5-0. You've got the Cowboys 4-1. You've got the Giants 4-1. Commanders like, whatever, see you later. But either way, it's like, are we demanding respect as a division right now?
Absolutely.
I loved today too. I don't know who asked, but somebody said like it went from NFC least to NFC Beast.
Yeah.
And like I'm like BRB.
Good.
I'm about to try and figure out how I can get that in my rewind tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, like I think you have to. I think what's challenging for people when you look at the NFC East is just the dumpster fire that it has been for so long. Do you know what I mean? It's consistently been just not great across the board, and so now I think it's hard for people to go to put that respect. Like they look at the Eagles and they say, oh, well, like easy schedule. They look at the Cowboys and they say, oh, well,
there's always a reason.
The defense or whatever. Yeah. And so I think it's hard for people to actually rationalize that like the NFC East is good this year.
Put some respect on our name.
But there's not always a reason, though. Like that's part of it. Is there doesn't have to be a reason. It's just the NFC East and that name. The first thing people associate it with is laughable division. So when you're seeing really these teams play on Sunday night, I couldn't think of a better matchup for a Sunday night game than the Cowboys and Eagles this week with where both of them are in their season. I mean, I asked CeeDee, hey, I asked CeeDee, I said, hey, so how is it going to feel when you strip that undefeated title away from the Eagles? And his eyes kind of lit up and he's like, oh, well, yeah,
that's some manifestation in the locker room.
I'm trying to.
I am here for that.
I'm trying to. I'm like, everybody,
Jess
they're not
killed it in the locker room.
Good vibes.
Thank you so much.
She killed it today.
But I also think that this is something that we're seeing, like, it's just a shift of power in the NFC, man. Like,
good.
Call it what you want, but I feel like there's a big changing of the guard, I guess you want to say. Like, you're seeing a lot of these older quarterbacks, Tom Brady.
I thought you were pointing at me and be like, no offense to older, and I was like, excuse you.
Barnacles. But no, you're seeing some like
the same
y'all. The quarterback play in the NFC, I think, has a lot to do with what we're seeing.
I'm sorry, keep going. I love you
Put
so
your
much.
down payment on the gravestone.
Start a GoFundMe for
No,
Kelsey's
I think-
tombstone.
Y'all. No,
She lived
my
a good
bad,
life.
y'all. But no, I think that also what you're seeing is like people just gonna have to get over it, man. The NFC is gonna change a lot right now. Like I said, you got a lot of the older quarterbacks. Like the quarterback play level in the NFC is just not. It's not the same as in the AFC right now. So I feel like, yeah, you might see divisions that typically aren't like good or whatever, teams that you would consider like this is the opportunity for them, those teams that were dominant all these years. When you start talking about like Green Bay, the Saints, all those teams, like they have different coaching staffs, they have different quarterbacks, all that stuff. A lot of teams are in a rebuilding phase. So when you start looking at the Cowboys and Eagles, you look at how they've drafted, you look at some of the things they're doing. So I think that's also something like people got to get over the fact that the NFL in itself is changing, and you're going to see teams that you typically wouldn't see in the playoffs and stuff like that, because it's that transitional time of, like, I guess, football right now.
And part of that, too, is you look at even just the similarities with the Cowboys and the Eagles, there's depth at positions that they haven't had before. Specifically with the Cowboys, you look at the depth within the defense. That took time to build, right? So I would almost have it, you take those building years, we've seen what have happened the last couple of years to get where they are now. Because now the depth within this defense, but then again, too, you look on the Eagles side of things, they're built, they may not have, in my humble opinion, the depth that the Cowboys have, right? But they have the depth, and it's nothing to play about, because they have the depth, it's there, and it's young depth within both of these teams. That's what I think is so exciting, that these are young players, that these are matchups we're not just going to see this season, but we're going to continue to see grow and grow as time goes on.
Well, I want to talk about the matchups some more. We're going to take our first break and dive into just that. So go ahead and stay with us, and we'll be right back.
At Jigsaw Dating, we obviously want the Cowboys to bring that 6th ring home. But to be honest, we're more focused on finding the person who will put a ring on your finger. That's why we created a dating app that reveals your face through meaningful conversation, so you can date deeper. Because it's personality that matters the most, not looks. Join Jigsaw Dating today, dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, Pepsi-loving football fans, it's time we had a lesson in trash talk. And I'm not talking about that stuff that happens on the field. What I'm talking about is trash, and it's the only thing that belongs in your garbage can. No, recycling might not be as thrilling as converting a 4th and long, but next time you're thinking about throwing that Pepsi Zero Sugar bottle away, just cap it back up and pretend you're down by 6 with the recycling bin wide open. Know the difference? Make a difference. Be a team player and recycle. Visit PepsiTrashTalk.com to learn more.
I'm Dak Prescott, quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
And they snap it to Prescott, who looks right. It's not there. He escapes left. He'll run for a first down.
Just like football, when it comes to crypto, it's important to have a team you can trust. With blockchain.com, I know I'm in good hands. Since 2011, they've been trusted by millions around the world to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrency.
Prescott's going to run this himself. Run it up the middle, and he scores.
Whether you're new to crypto or an active trader, they've got you covered. What are you waiting for? Get started at blockchain.com.
Welcome back to this second segment of Girls Talk, Boys Talk, provided to you by Jigsaw Dating, the official dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. Guys, head to AT&T Stadium on Saturday, October 22nd to experience Rally Day presented by SeatGeek. Get ready to cheer on your Dallas Cowboys with tours of AT&T Stadium, ticket giveaways, games, inflatables, and more. Visit AT&Tstadium.com/Rally Day for tickets and more information. All right, so while that whole thing is going on and you guys are getting ready for the game over at AT&T Stadium, the Cowboys are getting ready for a big matchup. Again, we know this is a big divisional game for them. Eagles are currently sitting at 5-0, Cowboys 4-1. If you want to be a homer for a second, and I'll just throw some fun stats your way because that's what I like to do. The regular season series is actually in favor of Dallas. They lead it 69-53. That's kind of fun. And if Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys go into Philly and get a win, the Cowboys would record their 9th straight win over an NFC East opponent. That would be the longest active win streak against one's own division. Last time they did that was 1998 to 1999. So it's been a minute, and I feel like that is the momentum that this team needs. Because, again, you mentioned there's transition in this league, there's transition within this team, and I feel like that would just be like a big bow on top of what this team has just been able to do in terms of turning, lemons into lemonade. So I do want to touch base really quickly. I feel like Jason Peters, to me, in terms of storylines, I love a good guy that used to play somewhere, goes to a division rival and then plays again. I mean, you guys remember DeMarco Murray going to the Eagles? Like, I wanted... like
that was heart-wrenching.
Part of me died inside. I'm not going to lie.
I was mad at him.
I would never forget that. I was literally at soccer practice and came out into the locker room and saw that news, and
that's like a moment in time that you look back as a Cowboys fan, you just remember. You're like, I know exactly where I was, what I was doing, because it was just so emotional.
But that's what's going to be for Eagles fans watching Jason Peters on the other side of the ball, like in their most hated rivals outfit. And, obviously you guys have been asking them tons of questions about it this week.
Their outfits.
Their uniform, their unis, their kits.
Not outfit.
I love that. I do that all the time. Like,
all the youths are saying
the drip,
the fit. I'm like, I tried to say that one time. I was like, God, I sound so old.
I'm weak.
I am ancient. Anyways, Jason Peters said...
Aisha pointed that out.
I know. She's like, get more Botox, please. Do we have a sponsor for that? We should. She talked about the dislike between the fan bases, and he said, I just know Philly fans are effing idiots when it comes to the camaraderie, and the Cowboys, any team really, they know that. They pride themselves on being nasty. Philly fans are the wildest fans out there. And then Jason Kelsey, on the other side, was saying, listen, like, this is a matchup. All I know is that, it's more than just a game. It's actually like a cultural thing for all of us, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it means so much to both sides of the team. I just feel like we're all excited for many reasons, but this week is different. It's special.
So in the locker room, I was talking to James Washington, a name we haven't brought up for a minute. And I was
rightfully
like, hey,
so.
How are you doing? How's everything, And I asked him, being more of a veteran player, and being within this division before, what these games mean, and you can give guys good advice, and you can really hone in on giving them the advice on what to expect. And I said, those Philly fans can be a little ruthless. How do you take that? Because when you're watching the game and you see fans throwing things and acting all crazy, on the outside, you're like, quit doing that to our players, But then on the player side, I was curious, like, how do you feel about that? And he goes, I think it's funny. Like, I kind of laugh at it. And I'm like, really? Like, you laugh at it? He's like, I mean, I ignore it. But, yeah, I've been around it enough that, it's cool to see them so engaged, essentially, in their sport. But he's like, yeah, I laugh at it. Philly's Philly. Like, that's, it was a really good conversation with him.
I also think you have a lot of young guys in this locker room that may be too young and, like, they don't care. Like, not in like I don't care, but it doesn't affect them the same way because maybe they don't understand the rival, or they're just like they're young and they're like, I'm just here to play. Like, because even talking to Jake Ferguson, I talked to Jake Ferguson and Henny today.
They're a mess,
and they're hilarious.
Henny and Ferg.
That's so cute. Do they call each other that?
I called them that.
I was like, I love that.
They're like,
so I talked to
hilarious.
them today, and I was just kind of talking to them about the game, and they're just like, yeah, we're just excited. Like, I really do think some of these guys, these young players on this team are so just like, I'm here. Like, I'm excited. I'm just excited to be here, that they're not so much worried about all of that going on. I know it's going to affect them, but also, too, we talked about it. They got some good mentorship in here on, like, exactly what to expect. You got Jason Peters in this locker room, so he could be like, don't stand over here. Don't go through this tunnel. Don't do this.
According to Tyler Smith, don't bring your families to the game.
I mean, and all of that stuff's important, but I don't know. Some of these young players, listening to them today, they seem like they're pumped up, and it just seems like they're just ready to go. It's like they've never experienced it, so they want to see what it's like.
Speaking of young players, Kevontae Turpin, I asked specifically, like, what has Jason Peters said to all of you guys? Something he brought up that I think was very interesting was wearing good cleats because you're in an outdoor area. So he said the biggest piece of advice he's gotten is the cleats and playing outside, which he said could work to his advantage. He's like, I feel like this is the week I need to prove myself. And so calling it now, Kevontae Turpin, taking it home so you can play this back.
As someone who used to
week.
live with an equipment manager, I am very familiar with the changing of cleats when you move to venues. When we were in London, they had to have special cleats. I mean, again, like there is so much detail that goes into this game. They'll probably bring 2 or 3 sets of cleats for these guys. They have to sometimes get the spikes out because, again, if you're on natural grass, it's different than turf. So, again, lots to talk about. I do want to dive into the matchups, though, because, again, there's lots to be said about this. Jalen Hurts, speaking of respect, I mean, that man is an MVP candidate right now. We were calling him a potential running back no less than 4 years ago, right?
I mean, yeah, but it's the same thing that everybody did with Lamar Jackson, and look at how he.
Sure.
To me, that's kind of how I see that transitioning.
And when I look at Dak, I see a lot of. I mean, it's a lot of not Dak. When you look at Jalen, there's a lot of similarities in his game to Dak when he was early. Like, he's just learning the position now, and he has an adequate offensive line that's helping him as well. But I'm not gonna sit up here and act like Jalen does not look like an improved player. He definitely looks improved in some areas, but his running ability is really driving a lot of their offense's productivity.
I actually was going to ask you about that because I was looking into some of the ways that this team has been successful. It seems that they've gotten a good lead in the first half of several of the games, which I think is important. My response to that would be Cowboys need to make sure they have the halftime adjustments. We've talked about that being a needed area of improvement for them. But also it feels like he's just matured as a quarterback, right? A lot of people were saying, listen, he can beat you with his feet. That's great. But he's also become more accurate. Whenever these defenses play him, if they put him in man-to-man, like he's reading that and tearing them apart. If they play you a little softer and put you over in more of a zone, he's becoming accurate as hell, which is really important for him. And defenses have to take note of that. Like Dan Quinn, I have full faith in him, but you can't just go out and say, here's a blanket statement of how the blueprint is going to be to beat Jalen Hurts and this team. So I guess, based on what you guys have been seeing leading up to this game, the performances they put on the table thus far, on tape thus far, offense for the Eagles is their strong suit. Cowboys defense is obviously their strong suit. So what are some key matchups, and Aisha, I'll go to you first, that you really want to make sure that people are staying tuned for coming this weekend?
Okay, so it starts in the trenches. I think when you look at this game overall, I'm far less worried about the Dallas defense than I am the offense. When you start looking at what Philly does well, their front seven is kind of crazy, right? Like, they do have depth there. Fletcher Cox, Sweat, like Hargraves. They have guys, Jordan Davis, who's really come along in the last couple of weeks. They have guys up front that can make you pay. And so one of the biggest matchups I'm looking for this game is how Connor McGovern plays in this game back. I think that him and Tyler on that left side are going to really have their hands full. Also, Tyler Biadasz dealing with Jordan Davis. The middle of their defensive line, of Philly's defensive line, is really their strength. It really drives a lot of what they do in their secondary. Secondary only is giving up, 58% percentage rate, completion percentage rate. So they're getting a lot of help from the guys in their front end. I would look for the middle of the Cowboys' offense and how the offensive line and how they handle the Eagles' defensive line is going to be a big part of how the Cowboys get going in the run game, especially. So what's up?
I feel like that's pretty interesting too, because I think that, again, like, it feels like the lights are really on, like, Jalen Hurts and the offense, but in reality, you don't want to leave out their defensive side of the ball either.
Their defense is stout, and their defense is a big reason why they've stayed in, some of these games. Also, too, like we talk about field position and things like that. They're not getting a whole bunch from their returners and so their offense is moving the ball solely on their own. They do have like a second quarter surge. They're averaging like 18 points in the second quarter, which is allowing them in the third quarter to kind of take their foot off the gas, kind of relax a little bit. But I think that with this Cowboys defense, you got to play all 4 quarters because they also can cause turnovers.
Would you call that relaxing in the third quarter, or do you feel like because they are so dynamic and it really is kind of a high-powered offense that they're more like tapering off? Do you feel like they're running out of steam by necessity because they just have exerted so much in that first half, or that's a place that the Cowboys could capitalize off of? Or do you feel like it's just like truly like, hey, listen, like, okay, that's our strategy?
So I did some digging, and it's a mixture of a couple things. I think that the Cardinals, in particular, I think they adjusted well in the second half better, run defense-wise and stuff like that. But I also, except for the last drive, they couldn't stop a nosebleed. But but I will say that with Philly, am I gonna get in trouble? My bad. But
I'm loving it. It's great.
But I will say that with Philly, I think that a lot of it is them. You've seen kind of Kellen do it. That's what I was saying. I think that the Philly offense and Dallas's offense is similar in how they do things a little bit. It's a lot of protection, like, kind of protect your quarterback and keep that lead. So they play, I guess you could say somewhat conservative. A lot of underneath stuff, a lot of intermediate stuff. They're not really trying to take a lot of big shots. But last game, they lost a lot of offensive linemen in the middle of the game. So Mailata went down, Kelsey went down. So then you saw their offense really decline in the second half because a lot of what they do is screens and stuff for their tight ends and wide receivers. So, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of their decision-making in the second half was, yes, defenses adjusting to them, absolutely, but then also them also just playing a little bit more conservative because they have a lead.
So, Haley, let me ask you this, because it seems like the narrative this season has been that this Cowboys defense is going to be the one that wins the game, right? And now that they have their hands full with the Eagles offense, it kind of feels like the script has been flipped a little bit, where it is actually genuinely on the Cowboys defense to do their job and do it well and, keep it kosher over here. But then on the flip side, Cooper Rush and team need to really, really be able to exploit. While the Philly defense is nothing to laugh about, it is, if you had to pick your poison, we're going to go with their defense. So do you feel like that's a fair assessment?
No, I do. I mean, I think Mike McCarthy and the entire organization has been very forward in saying that this is a team that's going to rely on its defense all year. So I love that they've embraced that, and I love that even the offense, CD talked about it today, they know that the defense is going to show up work. They know that they have work to do. What I think is really interesting about Cooper playing this game versus Dak playing this game is I think this is our first opportunity to really get to see Cooper not necessarily feel confident, because I think he's been confident the whole time, but I think this is an opportunity for him to be like, look, I'm no joke. I've come in and I've done my job. I think the wide receivers are a little bit more fired up now that Michael Gallup is getting back into his groove with his little toe drag swag. You've got Noah Brown, kind of solidifying his role as well. And then, of course, CeeDee Lamb. So I think if those guys can secure the catch, I think this is a really good opportunity for them to kind of show, our defense is banging, but we can get it done too. And I've said it through the last couple of weeks, the team that gets to 21st is the one that's going to win with this Cowboys team. If they're the ones that get to 21st, the defense has proven to hold them off. And I think what's interesting about this matchup, you talked about second quarter scoring being high for the Eagles, but in the second half of games, the Eagles have kind of struggled to put points on the board. They're very much a load heavy in that first half, put up points, and then just maintain through the rest of the game. And so I think that could bode well for the Cowboys too, like I said, if that offense gets going, if they're firing on all cylinders. And like I said, I think this is a kind of not a make or break game for Cooper, but just an opportunity for him to go out with a bang, so to speak.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and I think capitalizing in the red zone has been a matter of importance for the Cowboys, really this entire time that the season has been in duration. And I think it's been amazing to see Brett Money Maher beat Brett Money Maher with that leg. And I said earlier this week, I'm glad that he has really come into his own and become very stable. He's become a staple and stable for, really the Cowboys in getting all of these points on the board. However, I think making sure that you're getting your 7 and not your 3 is so important. And that needs to be...
Don't settle, kids.
Never settle. Queens, kings, everywhere. Never settle for anything. But
Jigsaw will love that.
Good. But you know what? I think that is something of importance, especially for this game, because like you said, Haley, they need to put the points on the board. And I appreciate Brett Maher, but give the man a rest for the week. And then, you know what, just let things fall where they may, but please get 7 on the board. Something else I wanted to mention was Eagles defensive tackle Jordan Davis really had an impactful game against the Cardinals. And, really, he showed great self-awareness. He's a young player and really arguably coming off of his best game with the Cardinals. Yep. So here's the thing, though. he hasn't met a GOAT yet called Zach Martin. So I'm excited to see that matchup really keying in on that as well.
And then again with the Eagles, they're 13th in red zone offense, defense rather. So there is opportunity there. I mean, they're stout for the most part, 4th in yards, but 25th in third down defense. And when you look at the Cowboys offense, they're like 29th in third down. So I know Chris was saying in the back, something's got to give. What's going to give? And it's so crazy because it's such like strength on strength or weakness on weakness.
Yep.
So then when you start talking about, like we were talking about special teams, I think field position is going to be huge in this game.
Brian Anger, we are talking to you.
We talking to you, Brian. No, I think it's going to be huge in this game because you're talking about both defenses. You want to make them earn it. Like, both sides of the ball offensively are going to have to earn it. So you are going to be looking for good punts. I'm expecting to see Bones do some crazy. I seen him earlier. He had that look in his eye.
Oh, no.
I'm joking. He's tall. My bad. But, yeah, like.
He's so wonderful.
He's a giant human. She was like, I see why they call him Bones. I was like, yeah.
He's so tall.
Yeah, but I think you could see special teams get a little busy in this game to kind of balance out everything right now. Like, I think you could see maybe some stuff from them.
I'm telling you, Cavante Turpin, he seemed pretty sure that this was the week, ladies and gentlemen.
Just probably because he's looking at tape. Because
good
Philly, out of the 5 games they played, 4 times, I think out of the 4 games, they've given up a 10-yard return each game. So, and you're talking about Cavante Turpin, who averages like 14 yards.
His mouth is like watering.
Yeah, so there's hopefully there's opportunity because even if it's just 10 yards, that's another first down your offense doesn't have to get. And it looks like first downs are a little hard to come by out here in these streets.
Which Mike talked about earlier.
Yes,
I don't know if you remember, because someone asked him what the struggles on third down has been, and he didn't even talk about third down. He said, we can't even address third down issues because we're having issues on first and particularly on second down. So all the downs. Gotta adjust all the downs.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about special teams, and I want to switch gears and go to the other side of the ball and break down those matchups too. We're going to take our final break here. Stick with us. We'll be right back, y'all.
At Jigsaw Dating, we obviously want the Cowboys to bring that 6th ring home. But to be honest, we're more focused on finding the person who will put a ring on your finger. That's why we created a dating app that reveals your face through meaningful conversation, so you can date deeper. Because it's personality that matters the most, not looks. Join Jigsaw Dating today, dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, Pepsi-loving football fans, it's time we had a lesson in trash talk. And I'm not talking about that stuff that happens on the field. What I'm talking about is trash, and it's the only thing that belongs in your garbage can. Now, recycling might not be as thrilling as converting a 4th and long, but next time you're thinking about throwing that Pepsi Zero Sugar bottle away, just cap it back up and pretend you're down by 6 with the recycling bin wide open. Know the difference? Make a difference. Be a team player and recycle. Visit PepsiTrashTalk.com to learn more.
With Smoothie King's original Angel Food and new Angel Food Slim without added sugar, you no longer have to choose between treating yourself and hitting your goals this summer. You don't have to choose between great taste and feeling great. Because at Smoothie King, every blend is made with whole fruits and no syrups, so you can satisfy your cravings without compromise. The only choice you will need to make is which one is best for you. Try our classic Angel Food or the new Angel Food Slim, blended without added sugar. Smoothie King, rule the day.
All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating, the official dating partner of the Dallas Cowboys. Monster Jam, y'all, it's coming up. The most action-packed motorsports experience in the world returns to Arlington. Celebrate the 30th anniversary of Monster Jam on Saturday, October 15th at AT&T Stadium. Tickets are on sale now at SeatGeek.com, the official ticketing provider of AT&T Stadium. Okay, so we talked about their defense versus our offense and how our offense really has to step it up. They actually might be the key component to win this game, assuming that defense is just doing their defense things, right? DQ, we love you. But I want to flip the script a bit and talk about their offense, Jalen Hurts against our defense. So Nick Sirianni, head coach of the Eagles, actually had some interesting things to say about Micah. Everyone talks about Micah, but take a quick listen and then we'll dive in.
I just remember just how much of a playmaker he is, and how he was, and being at Penn State, and so a lot of respect for him. He's doing the same things he was doing in Penn State, and he's doing it at a high level in the NFL.
Okay, so that soundbite I loved because Nick Sirianni was asked, hey, during the 2021 NFL draft, did you ever think of maybe getting Micah? And he was like, honestly, I was really focused on Devontae Smith that year. He's like, so I don't really remember. But what was interesting, because I went back and I looked at the stats from that game he's talking about in Penn State. It was the 2019 Cotton Bowl where Penn State played Memphis. Micah had, this isn't 2019, y'all. Micah's in college, okay? He had 14 total sacks, 7 solo tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss within that game. That was in 2019.
He had 14 what?
14 total tackles.
Tackles. I thought you said 14 sacks, and I was
You're like,
my
man,
goodness, that boy was busy.
They were calling
He ate his Wheaties that day.
No.
Even then, though, 14 total tackles
that's a
in a
lot,
college game, that's huge. So that's what Nick Sirianni was talking about, remembering him even being a playmaker back in college. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So we obviously know Michael's going to be a big component. And Aisha, I want to turn to you and talk about, again, asking you to set the script in terms of the matchups that we should be watching for in terms of the Eagles offense against this Dallas defense. We know it's strength against strength. Mm-hmm. Are there areas at all that you feel like this Cowboys team can exploit?
Sugar, honey, iced tea. So, I mean, they may or may not have a corner. Gardner Johnson, CJ Gardner Johnson, they moved him to, he's kind of playing this weird hybrid role right now where he was you can't hear me.
There you go.
You can hear me? My bad.
Hear you now. I'm trying to hear you.
My bad. Well, because it's giant.
That is a really big mic. Has that always been there? I feel like that's new. I have no idea.
This is good. Okay. But the gentleman has been moved to, he's playing kind of like this safety situation, and this guy's originally a corner. So I'm not going to say, like, you just picking him to pick on, but I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, secondary-wise, James Bradbury's had a good season. They brought him in this offseason. I don't know if he just be like picking on people, but that's probably the guy that I would, I guess, pick on. I think the middle of the field is going to be open as well in certain areas. If you can get behind their linebackers, they're some rangy guys. Like, they're linebackers, Kazir White. But as far as you mean like defensively, you like who do you?
Well, I even mean like the Cowboys defense against the Eagles offense. Like, do you feel like there's something that the Cowboys defense and Dan Quinn can take advantage of in terms of the Eagles offense? Because again, like
Driscoll. I mean, listen, if Driscoll starts
it's the arrow that you just drew.
Listen, I've got it.
She's got an X on this man's forehead. I feel bad.
Like X and O.
I mean, when you start talking about, I mean, if Mailata can't go, and Jeff Driscoll is there at left tackle, he gave up 6 pressures last week by himself. Yeah, find him, figure it out.
Find him.
And I expect for Dan Quinn to do that. Like, I'm just, quite honestly, he plays the matchup game really well, and he, just like what the Rams did last week with finding spots for Aaron Donald, I expect for him to move some of these guys around. Also, too, Dan Quinn has really shifted this season than what he did last year. If you look at the Cowboys last year defensively, they were running a lot of man. So that's why you saw some of the big plays being given up. But this year, they're running a mixture of zone. They're blitzing situationally. They're doing a lot of different stuff. And I think that when you're talking about a young quarterback like Jalen Hurts, there's going to be opportunities in there to confuse him and maybe get some plays off of that as well. So
I'm excited, too, just to see specifically Trayvon Diggs. We've talked about how much he has elevated his game from being a guy who can get an interception to a guy who is now a tackler. Like, when you talk about someone who's racking up those tackles, Trayvon Diggs comes to mind. But I'm also interested as well to see how the safeties handle Dallas Goedert. I think Dallas Goedert has really flown under the radar. You don't talk about him a lot because he's a tight end in a room where we have names like Travis Kelce, George Kittle floating around. But I think he leads the league, if not in the top 3 for yards after the catch, which, it's obviously can be dangerous. And I think that this will be a really good test for that 3-headed monster with Jaron Kearse and the rest of the safeties. So I think that that's kind of what I'm paying attention to. And you have to put respect on the Eagles wide receivers. I spent 2 years covering Devontae Smith at Alabama and his Heisman season, the things that kid is able to do, the way he is able to just he's a ball player, y'all, and it's so much fun to see it elevated onto the NFL level as well. So I'm just curious to watch those matchups, specifically the secondary. That's what I'm watching out for.
I mean, we're going to see if they have enough time to get the ball downfield, but I do think he is the more nuancey route runner guy, and then A.J. Brown is just like 50-50, throw it up to me, and I agree with you. That matchup is going to be fun to watch because Trayvon Diggs has talked about, he's like, I like to play bigger receivers because it's like I'm big and you big too. Like, and so Donovan Wilson as well. Like if the Cowboys line up in their base nickel defense, one thing about Donovan Wilson, he likes to come down in the box, especially with running backs. He's gonna be hunting running backs. So I'm curious to see. A lot of people have talked about a possible spy, with Jalen Hurts lighting and his escapability. The Cowboys have to contain this game and try to keep him in that pocket. It kind of reminds me of like when you would play like an Aaron Rodgers. You're like, we don't want him to run outside the pocket. Please. Edges have to contain, seal, keep him contained. And if he does escape in that A gap, B gap, like I talked about, I think that we will see Micah Parsons play more linebacker this game. And I like that. I want them to set the tone early. Make him pay.
I love that. Make him pay. No, I also think the pace of this game is going to be important for both sides, both offenses, because Jalen Hurts is going to speed that up as much as he can.
They go tempo.
Do you blame him? If you have a Micah Parsons on one side, you have a Tank on I don't blame any quarterback that's like, get this ball away from me when you're playing the Cowboys defense,
Get it
right?
out here.
But on the flip side of that, the Cowboys offense, I think Cooper Rush needs to be aware of the blitz that is going to come after him. And I think, again, that goes with, one, you establish that run game. Zeke, Tony Pollard, I'm talking to both of y'all. Get those yards. Eat it up, both of y'all. I want to see a dynamic duo buffet with the Philadelphia Eagles with that run game.
A dynamic. Can we trademark
We
that?
just did that.
A dynamic duo buffet.
Well, I want the run game to be established so we can get that play action and then use those weapons in the wide receiver
All you can
core.
eat, baby.
I think communication is going to be huge too, though, sis. Like, we got to trademark.
We got a trademark and a motto to go with it.
But we talked about it. Like, they're practicing, like, Philly is going to be nuts. It's going to be crazy, right? So I think
ready.
Also in this game with this young offensive line, communication is going to be huge. Again, it's not so much I worry about it on the defensive side of the ball because they talk a whole bunch. But on the offensive, with this offensive line, this young offensive line, Tyler Biotish getting the plays out, making sure that everyone's in the right place. McGovern, Tyler, they're going to have to, because I really feel like the Eagles do a lot. They do a lot post-snap with their defense. So, yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. Well, we have officially run out of time.
Let's go.
I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with some summary notes in general. I feel like it's going to be a little bit of slow and steady wins the race. Defense needs to show up and do their thing. I'm going to call it now. Give me the halftime adjustments. Those need to be fire this coming weekend because I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be a close one, you guys. And special teams, like, listen, we all know historically I have a hard time with them, so I might be screaming Brett Maher's name in all the good ways, and hopefully I am right about that. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We do appreciate you tuning in. As always, for Haley Sutton, Aisha Morrison, Justin Navarez, I'm Kelsey Charles. This has been another episode of Girls Talk, Boys Talk, brought to you by Jigsaw Dating.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys?